Castro, Chairman of the United States Commission on Civil Rights. I was appointed Chairman of the Commission in March by President Obama. I want to thank the President for the courage and commitment that he's made to diverse communities, and thank him for the opportunity to serve the people of the United States in this important position. The Commission is an independent federal agency made up of bipartisan members of the Commission. There are 8 of us, half Democrats, half conservatives, and our mandate is to conduct briefings and hearings on matters of civil rights and discrimination in violation of the Constitution and violation of the Equal Protection Clause based on race, national origin, color, sex, disability, religion, as well as disability status. We also investigate complaints of voting rights violations for the same basis. We also are a clearinghouse for national discrimination information and a repository for complaints of violation of civil rights and discrimination. As a repository of complaints, our job is not to investigate those complaints, but to take those individual complaints and provide them to various federal and state agencies who actually have the mandate to investigate those claims. In that context, in August of 2000, President Clinton set out an Executive Order 13166, to all federal agencies to make them more accessible to communities known as Limited English Proficient Communities, LEP. That executive order was reissued with great vigor recently by Attorney General Eric Holder in February of this year, directing all federal agencies within the constraints of their existing budget to begin to look at what those agencies can do to become substantively and significantly accessible to communities that have limited English proficiency. There are many such communities like that in the United States. One of the larger ones, of course, are Spanish speakers. For me, as someone who was born and raised initially in Spanish only, eventually learning to speak English through programs like Head Start, I have a unique understanding of the needs of limited English proficient communities. And that's why I've made it a mandate for my chairmanship to explore how the United States Commission on Civil Rights can become accessible to limited English proficient individuals. I've created a task force at the Commission's headquarters that is going to look in and has already begun to move forward on various initiatives. Our staff task force is contacting and coordinating with other federal agencies of similar size and scope as ours to determine what they have done to make their agency more accessible to limited English proficient individuals. We've also taken steps to begin to update and translate this important document as a commission document called Getting Uncle Sam to Enforce Your Civil Rights. It was created in 2007. We are in the process now of updating this in English, and then we plan to provide Spanish translations to this document and eventually other languages, but initially the pilot effort will be focused on Spanish speakers so that we can make this accessible. At some point in the not too distant future, the Commission will launch a new website. It is our commitment to make sure that that website provides more robust access to limited English proficient individuals than our current website does. In addition, we are going to be working with, hopefully, friends in the media to be able to get to the community the needs and ideas of the projects that we're working on, and let the folks know in the communities, particularly LEP communities, that the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights is here. We're here to serve and provide information, as well as to be able to forward complaints of violations of civil rights laws. Currently, you can call the United States Commission on Civil Rights to file a complaint at 1-800-552-6843. If you're someone who is limited English proficient, for example, in Spanish, we do have a staff member at the Commission headquarters who will take that complaint and be able to forward it to the appropriate federal agency. But this is one of many steps that we intend to take over the next year and into the coming years to make sure that the Commission is more accessible to others that don't have the ability to speak English fluently or at all. Because at the end of the day, the Commission's mandate is to be the nation's conscience on civil rights. But also, I believe, the Commission is an important actor in ensuring that the American dream is available to all individuals in this country without discrimination. And we cannot do that unless we are accessible to communities who cannot access us due to language barriers. Also, the Commission, in the last few months under my chairmanship, has been very active in moving forward on various studies. We have completed in May a hearing which will result in a report in September on issues of bullying, as well as peer-to-peer student violence and harassment based on a student's race, national origin, gender, disability status, religion, or or sexual orientation. At the end of September, we will issue that report to the President and Congress and outline our findings and recommendations in the hopes to have an important impact on that very important issue that affects so many families across the country. We are also in the process of finalizing a report on school discipline, particularly disparate impact and disparate treatment of students of color versus non-minority students in the imposition of discipline in the K-12 school system. At Friday's commission meeting, we meet once a month, we approved a study for our 2012 statutory report focused on Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act requires that certain states, as well as subdivisions of states, provide pre-clearance requests to the U.S. Department of Justice if they're going to change anything that relates to voting. Chief among those are issues of redistricting. As the redistricting process begins across the country and continues in many jurisdictions, Section 5 pre-clearance is an important aspect to ensure that those changes in voting procedures and maps do not have an adverse effect on communities based on their race or language or ethnicity. So our study on that will begin in this coming fiscal year. We also approved a study on human trafficking, which is really a modern form of slavery. In particular, we're going to look at sex trafficking as a form of gender-based discrimination. When you look at people who are being brought into the sex trafficking industry, 94% of them are women. So we want to explore whether they are being targeted because of their gender and thus being a form of gender discrimination. We're also working on providing additional information through our state advisory committees. We have 51 state advisory committees across the country, many of whom are conducting their own briefings and studies. Our Washington, D.C. State Advisory Committee just issued last week a phenomenal study on affirmatively furthering fair housing in the District of Columbia, which has nationwide implications because as many jurisdictions who are required to affirmatively further fair housing are beginning to be reviewed by the Department of Justice, it's important that they know what steps they should be taking to be in compliance with the HUD regulations. Also, at the end of this process, we want to make sure that when we outreach to communities such as limited English proficient communities, not only do they know the work that we're doing, but that they can provide us with their input and their feedback in their own language and in a manner that is accessible to them, including on these projects that I discussed, as well as future projects that the Commission may look at, including one we're doing in August, focused on the civil rights implications of eminent domain. When a state or municipality, for purposes of public good, takes private property, we want to examine what the impact may or may not be on communities of color, communities based on race, ethnicity, national origin, gender, disability, as well as religion. So we look forward to being able to continue to communicate with members of the press and through the community, through you, on the various projects that we're working on, especially to be able to continue to give you updates as we move forward on making the Commission more accessible to communities of limited English proficiency. With that, I'll open it up for questions.